Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this Tuesday, September 24th, 2019 day, also known as Voter Registration Day and Happy Punctuation Day. So we've got two holidays to be able to celebrate today, and we are so grateful that you have decided to celebrate those holidays with us because we have got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about Kanye West in a little bit, and they went on his wife, Kim Kardashian West, went on The View, and apparently Kanye West has had a born-again experience with Jesus. What is the fascination? One, we can rejoice if the news is true, but also what's the fascination that we have relative to celebrity conversion stories? And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Great news that's also coming out about the fact that abortions are down for what seems like the fourth or fifth year. And so we'll talk about what are some of the factors that are causing these numbers to be able to go down. No thanks for the prayers. There's new research out that apparently non-religious individuals are willing to pay so that you might not pray for them. You like that alliteration? I'm on a roll today. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the climate crisis as well. As world leaders are gathering in New York right now for the UN meetings, much is being made relative to the crisis, the climate emergency, and a young 16-year-old that is shaming our world leaders. And we'll talk about all of that and more on today's show. And joining me here at the Millennial Roundtable, we have the one, the only, from Human Coalition Action, Chelsey Youman. Chelsey, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well today.
Okay, Chelsey is in her, I guess this is like your third month at Human Coalition Action?
I started July 1.
Okay, so July 1.
Just in time for July 4th.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So I don't know if
And it has been fireworks.
Has it been fireworks?
Yeah.
Ooh, that
It's
was
been
good.
fun.
That's
in
good.
a fun way, though.
Okay. I feel good about this. And so really looking forward to Chelsey's contributions, as always, on today's show. And then we've also got the one and only Kat Armstrong of Polished Ministries here in the Dallas area. Kat, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here.
So great and so great. So tell our audience a little bit about Polished Ministries. Started this almost 11 years ago, correct?
Yep. We're on our 11th year.
Okay.
We've reached close to 40,000 women with the gospel through our hundreds and hundreds of events spread across the nation. So we're an organization for young professional women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s
Okay.
that feel maybe disconnected from God or disillusioned by the local church. So we invite them in to do professional development and networking, and we share the gospel along the way.
That's phenomenal. And you started this.
Yes, I co-founded the organization.
That's phenomenal. So tell us a little bit about that. What generated this?
Sure. I was the second youngest VP of sales of a network marketing company, and getting to share my faith often, I would say every other day, extremely ineffectively.
Wow.
I was trying to
It's not
figure
really
out
where I expected you to go with that.
trying to figure out what it looks like to have spiritual conversations with people that you're going to have ongoing working relationships with. And that was challenging, something I wasn't prepared for. And I was also halfway through my program at Dallas Theological Seminary and thought, what if we created a safe space where women could navigate career and explore faith together? And so Polished was born, and I've devoted my life to it the last 11 years, in addition to preaching and speaking and authoring a book.
That's phenomenal. And so authoring a book as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
It just released.
Okay.
It's called No More Holding Back.
Okay.
Emboldening women to move past their barriers, to find their worth, and to serve God everywhere.
Wow.
So I talk a lot about misogyny in the church in my book.
Wow.
Yes.
Hey.
That's awesome. I'm going to read it.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm interested in that topic.
Okay.
Very much
Okay.
so.
Awesome.
There it is. Okay. And so now I feel very, go ahead.
She described it a little bit before we began as like a young life for young professional women.
Yes.
And I am a former Young Life leader.
Okay.
And I just love that you took that concept of like witnessing and outreach, which Young Life is really an outreach ministry. I think I've heard this criticism a lot of Young Life that, oh, well, those are the kids that aren't going to church and youth group and they're doing crazy things on the weekends. And I would always say, exactly.
Yes.
They are the unchurched kids and we are like bringing the gospel to them. And so you're very much, your ministry is just incredible. And I'm really glad that you continue to ministry and outreach into the professional world, which is just so, so important.
Yeah, we have to keep centering the conversation around unchurched, dechurched, overchurched women, because a lot of folks look at Polish and think, oh, it's a networking or maybe a community builder, but truthfully, it's an outreach. So we really want to see women come to faith in Christ, go back to church, and so we applaud the Young Life model. We think the attractional model they've created is so effective.
That's phenomenal. And I always think whenever I hear critiques about Young Life or whenever I hear critiques about any organization or ministry in particular, I always just have this refrain in the back of my head. Different strokes for different folks. Like there are Peters and there are Pauls.
Where was that in the Bible?
So I think that was in the New Pitts edition. And so it's kind of smelly, but it feels good. And so is that weird?
It's a little weird.
I know I went there. Sometimes there are great jokes. Sometimes there's decent jokes. And a lot of times there's really bad jokes. And this qualifies as one of those jokes. But nevertheless, it's just I just think about the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15 and just this idea that God has shaped and fashioned us all very uniquely, and there are certain individuals that are more prone to being Peters of the world, other individuals that are Pauls, then there's Lydias, there's Huldas, there's Ruths, there's Boaz, like there's just all these various stripes, and I'm not a fan of when we say that there's one way to do something. I think there's a lot of things that are exclusive in the biblical narrative that we can hold with a tight fist and closed fist. I think there's other things like our ecclesiology, kind of the way we do church, can be held with an open hand as well. And so that kind of brings us into kind of the first topic. And so I want us to jump into it in the deep end right now. We're going to talk about Kanye West. That's what we're going to do right now. And so news that was breaking last week, reality TV star Kim Kardashian West was a guest on the ABC show The View, where she spoke about her husband's religious beliefs and revealed that he sometimes hosts pop-up churches around the country through his music ministry Sunday service. She said, quote, Kanye started this to really heal himself. It was a really personal thing, and it was just his family and friends. She told host Sonny Hostin, he had an amazing evolution, being born again and being saved by Christ. She went on and said, quote, people always ask, what are you worshiping? It's a Christian service like a musical ministry. They talk about Jesus and God. And so the man that was on the cover of Rolling Stone that was depicted being crucified, the man that sings the song Jesus Walks, is now a man that the hound of heaven, according to Spurgeon, has hunted down. And so initial thoughts on this, Chelsey?
Well, I did want to add one thing I thought was actually really interesting from the story, which is that he's set to release a gospel album. Yeah. Did you already say that?
No.
Okay. I thought maybe I missed it. He is set to release a gospel album, and the tracks appear to be, Christian tracks. The names of them were released here pretty shortly. So that surprised me a little bit. But I looked into it a little bit. He was raised with a very, very Christian mother. So his mother raised him in the church. It's something he was pretty vocal about. And she actually died tragically from cancer a few years ago, which was really devastating, obviously, to him. And that's kind of when I think he proclaims to have departed from the faith and came out with all of this very anti-religious or heretical themed music was all in that phase after his mother died. And we know he struggles with some mental illness and bipolar disorder and depression. And so if he did find Christ, that's great.
Yeah. And we have got to take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A year ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of Colorado baker Jack Phillips, the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop. When asked to design a wedding cake for a same-sex couple, he declined. The Colorado Civil Rights Commission declared that he was in violation of the state's Anti-Discrimination Act. Although the court ruled in his favor, a number of Christian attorneys and leaders lamented that it was a narrow ruling. The justices didn't really address the larger issues of whether any business can refuse service on the basis of religious objection. But I found that often Supreme Court decisions are like falling dominoes. Other judges get the message, and we can begin to see the dominoes falling in favor of religious liberty rather than against it. Two examples illustrate this. Last month, the U.S. Court of Appeals ruled in favor of 2 videographers in Minnesota who produce commercials, live events, and other videos. They declined to produce a wedding video for a same-sex couple based on their religious beliefs. Last week, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled in favor of 2 Christian artists who design wedding invitations. They were asked to custom design material for a same-sex ceremony, but declined. The court made it clear that their ruling was limited to the 2 artists and not a blanket exemption from the ordinance for all other business operations. But not every court seemed to have received the message. The Washington State Supreme Court ruled against florist Barronelle Stutzman, who declined to provide a flower arrangement for a same-sex ceremony. The U.S. Supreme Court vacated the ruling and ordered the state Supreme Court to reconsider the case in light of the Masterpiece Cake Shop decision. But the state court's judges came back with the same decision, so she wants the U.S. Supreme Court to reconsider her case. I believe the justices need to take up her case and send a strong, clear message. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your host, Nick Pitts. We have been talking a little bit about Kanye West, and news broke last week that apparently he has had a conversion experience, being born again as a follower of Jesus. Kim Kardashian West, his wife, going on The View and telling the American audience. And so that's generated quite a few responses. There are individuals that are a little bit more antagonistic towards Kanye West simply because of the lyrics and some of the songs that he has chosen to produce and put out there. And there are others that are rejoicing at this because they are beginning, one, from the religious standpoint, but then also, two, the political standpoint as well. If you'll remember from a context perspective, earlier this year, Kanye West made some news because of some of the conservative points that he was making, utilizing his platform to make such points, even to the extent that he was invited to the White House to be able to talk with President Trump about some of the issues that were facing the black community. And so now we find ourselves with a very interesting dynamic as we're hearing about Kanye West, this individual that was you wouldn't characterize his rap music as Christian, but it's good, but it's generated quite a response within Christian audiences. And so, Kat, your thoughts when you heard the news about Kanye West and his conversion experience?
I'm always going to rejoice when I hear someone joins the kingdom. I mean, glory. I have a real hard, I trust very few people. It has to be earned. And so, his 2010 monster video, sexualized women, dead on the bed. I mean, there's some history with Kanye. So he would do well to follow the Biebs and maybe make some professional and very public explanations about how he's moving away from the way that he has treated women, spoken about women. So I'm always going to beat that drum when he calls his wife a profanity. That song Perfect B was really popular. And so I have a big problem with that, but I'm really excited that he might be my brother in Christ. And I think these healing services could bring a lot of healing in his life and to others. And we know in Zephaniah that God's singing over us. So we'll see. I will wait and see.
So maybe that singing is rapping now. Who knows? So what Kat is alluding to is Justin Bieber was another individual. As we know, he is a pop star for our listening audience that might not be aware of Justin Bieber. He had a public profession where he started to make a turn, became very much associated with Carl Lentz and other individuals within Hillsong Church. And what Kat was identifying is almost to a certain degree like the tax collector, man, like beginning to go back and saying, I've done wrong in the past, and here are the ways that I've done wrong. And I want to try to rectify those mistakes in such a way that I might be able to illuminate the new standard of living that I'm now putting myself toward. And that's an interesting point because, like you've mentioned, there's some problematic things that, to say the very least, that were characteristic of Kanye's past. And I've just being completely honest with our audience. Like I've been a Kanye fan for quite a while now. I remember that Through the Wire single that he dropped, like his work with Twista. I know what you're thinking right now. They did play that in Tennessee, and so it's just very. I've been a huge fan of him, and obviously would love for him to come to know Jesus. And the idea of this news has been very encouraging to me. But Chelsey, I want to get to another point because Kat alluded to it, and I want to drill down on it here with this next point. Is there a fascination among Christians? And if there is, what is the fascination among Christians towards these celebrity conversion stories? You know, we hear there's just a gravitation when we see somebody give praise to God, and after a football game, or towards Justin Bieber when we hear one of these big stars, whether it's in music or TV. Is there kind of a fascination towards these celebrity conversion stories? And what do you think is the appeal of these things?
I think there is, because according to my Facebook feed, anyone and all of my mom's friends and sometimes they'll catch on, like when Justin Bieber came out professing the faith, really excited, enthusiastic about that. And I think that's great. I think that we should celebrate when the good news reaches someone's heart and the work the Holy Spirit's doing. And I have no doubt in my mind that doesn't occur overnight. I mean, I think we all know that sanctification takes time. Our entire lives we are being sanctified. And so I think sometimes Christians get really disappointed when they see public personas, public figures who, I think Donald Trump's a great example of this. Yeah. Like a lot of evangelicals talk about his closeness with Pence and that, he professes to be a Christian now. And, we are always going to expect Christians to act like Christians. And when they don't, we view it as hypocritical or maybe inauthentic. And I don't know that that's always fair, because I think we're all being sanctified. It's just not always on a public stage. Mm-hmm. Right. With that said, however you phrased it, excitement or obsession with, we see so few public individuals who are in mainstream fame represent Christ. Mm-hmm. And I used to say when I worked at First Liberty all the time, the only time I ever saw a Christian on TV was my client. The only time I ever saw a Christian on TV was someone who, my clients who I represented, who stood up for their faith, got fired for their jobs or threatened for their jobs or whatever it may be, on the news talking about what occurred for them on the religious liberty side. And so when I think that we see someone on TV or famous saying that they represent Christ, we're hopeful as Christians that they do so well and that they use their platform in a positive way. So that's my take on it. Okay. I'm a little less, I don't know what the word is, but I don't particularly, I'm not fame hungry. So I don't always care that much. I kind of assume Hollywood is Hollywood. Yeah. And let's not forget that we don't know what kind of backwards pastors or theology is being taught to these individuals. Mm-hmm. So I don't know who their pastors are. I don't know what's happening at these Sunday worship services. I hope that real scripture is being taught, but I know California has a very warped version sometimes of Christianity. And so I don't always expect them to look like what we look like here in Dallas or the Bible Belt. Everybody's taught and discipled in different ways.
Yeah, I watched the 50-minute, one of his Atlanta pop-up worship services, and there really wasn't any central talking about the scriptures at all. It's really all worship, singing. Mm-hmm. I'm a little bit more cynical just in general. This album's dropping in a couple days. It's almost feels like a book launch. He's dripping. It's really strategic. I'm not saying it's not real.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not celebrating that Jesus may be his king, but it's also the title of his album. And so we will see.
Yeah. I think I'm just, there's a part of me that, I think we all agree baseline, we're celebrating. If the news is true, we're celebrating. I think there's a part of me that's like there's a part of me that's really excited about it. And I'm always like, Chelsey, a point that you brought up, there is a great book by Michael Lindsay. It calls Faith in the Halls of Power. And what Lindsay does so well is he interviews over 350 leaders across the field. So he interviews leaders in politics. He interviews leaders in the business world. He interviews leaders in entertainment, and he interviews leaders in culture. And what he in sports, rather. And so what he finds, though, is that through these interviews, he identifies, because of some of within his qualitative research, two different types of Christians and the outworkings of Christianity. He calls it populist Christianity and cosmopolitan Christianity. And so populist Christianity would be the type of individual that would go to a revival, be the type of individual that probably, if you got in their car, they have KLTY or they have a radio station on that's explicitly saying Christian things. But then there's the cosmopolitan Christianity, and these are the type of individuals that are probably less wear their faith on their sleeve. They're probably an individual that might go to an art gallery opening. They're the type of individual, and so you hear about some of these type of Christians as well. So General Mattis is one individual. We just had him on DBU's campus. You're not going to hear him say Jesus a lot, but we do know that there's a faith commitment there. You're not going to hear. So another example is Joel McHale from The Soup on the E! Channel. He's not an individual that's going to be telling you that he's a Christian with his stuff, but he's a Bible-believing Christian.
Well, I think that's really important to note, because don't forget where we live is it's the Bible Belt. We Christians
Great
are a
point.
dime a dozen. Yep. You go to church, you're a Christian. Like, there are, where my sister lives in California, like, people whisper about their Christianity because they are ostracized. They're called horrible names. They're called bigots. And she lives in Orange, Southern California, which is relatively conservative. So in parts like LA or Hollywood, like you're discussing, like, to be a Christian or say the name of Jesus, there's tangible persecution.
It's just different outworkings of the faith. And so looking as an American Christian, it looks very different than a Costa Rican Christian, or very different from a Russian Christian. So I always have that viewpoint. I don't want to force I don't want to self-theologize on these individuals, and kind of want to allow them the opportunity as the Spirit leads them. What does it look like for the righteous in this particular spot to live by faith? Understanding there's certain close-handed issues that there can be no disagreement on, open-handed issues as to certain other issues that aren't as strong as the virgin birth, one might say, that we can have disagreement on. But we've got to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined by Kate Armstrong and Chelsey Youman. And I want to make you all aware of something. There is an individual named Archbishop Michael Ramsey, and he says, pride does not grow well in soil that has been tilled by thankfulness. And I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Last week, you know that we had the Truth team here, and we were explicitly making sure that you all were aware that there were great needs at Point of View, and in turn, you all responded to that. And you were exceedingly generous to the point that we exceeded our goal that we had set for the week. And so I wanted to say thank you before we move forward anymore. But I also, with that, wanted to remind you that there are still opportunities, because we've heard from some of you and wondering if there's still opportunities to be able to give one, but then also to be able to receive some of the cool gifts that we were giving when you reach a certain level of giving. And I want to say yes. And so if you're watching on Facebook, I want to go ahead and apologize, as always, because you've got to see my face. But I'm about to block my face, so it might be a little bit better for you. Because if you are willing to contribute at the $50 a month level, there are two things that I want to make you aware of. One is this Yeti little cup that has the Point of View logo on it, that if you contribute at a $50 level, you will get this great Yeti cup that if you're a cold drink person like myself, because if you drink a hot drink too quickly, you will start to sweat. So for those of us that are more cold drink people, this will keep your drink cold. If you're a hot drink person and you enjoy the heat in the morning, this will keep your drink hot as well. So you'll get this if you contribute at a $50 level, as well as this Gene Getz Life Essentials Study Bible. And so here it is. If you contribute at the $50 level, this will be our gift to you, leather bound, and it's kind of cool. And so it's a Bible, and it's life essentials. So there's biblical principles to live by. You can learn to apply God's word in your life. And I believe Kirby said yesterday there's over 1,000, or last week rather, there's over 1,000 principles that are scattered throughout the biblical narrative as you make your way through. So highly encourage that. I remember one of my first Bibles was the Life Essentials Bible, a New Living Translation. It's one of the first ones that I got. And it was a hardback because I was too cheap to buy the leather bound, and the hardback ended up falling off. But that's leather bound, so that's not going to fall off. And you can try it out, and you can test it out. But you first got to contribute $50 a month, and we'll send you the tumbler as well as the Life Essentials Study Bible. So again, you can do that by one of two ways. You can go on the Point of View website at www.pointofview.net, or you can give us a call, 800-347-5151. Again, that number is 800-347-5151. So without further ado, let's continue the conversation. Ladies, I want to make our way towards not everybody wants your thought and prayers after a disaster. This was, Kat, maybe one of the most fascinating studies that I've seen in a long time. And it has, I'm a study guy. I love kind of these social science surveys that they put out. And so this was such a fascinating survey. So I want to kind of share a little bit of it. So what they found is that they were polling individuals, and what they found is certain individuals, i.e. Christians, are willing to pay individuals to pray for them, while non-religious people are willing to pay to keep the prayers away from them. So let's look up a little bit more. These were in the Proceedings of the Natural Academy of Sciences. So Christians in the experiment valued a prayer from a Christian stranger on average of $4.36. Okay, a prayer from a priest was even higher, with an average of $7.17. That's an order at Chick-fil-A is where my mind went. Non-religious people, on the other hand, were willing to pay $1.66 to avoid a prayer from a priest, and more than double that price of $3.54 to avoid one from a Christian stranger. Kat, initial impressions when you hear these numbers, see this study, what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, dollars do assign value.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we just took the dollar sign away, we could just look at the value number and say, wow, there is definitely, we look at clergy and value their prayers more than we do a total stranger.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting. I think it plays into the disillusionment that a lot of people in our country feel towards people of faith. And maybe some really empty, very religious, I'm going to pray for you without lending a hand. But I had so many questions about the article, more questions than I had comments. Was this after a tragedy on the ground that they were finding this? I mean, do you know more about it?
Yeah, so I haven't looked into the hard. I've only looked at the conclusions part and the results part. I didn't actually look into the methodology part, but I would assume that these are individuals that had just experienced a tragedy, and in turn they're being asked. One of the aspects of it that kind of went through the back of my head was kind of the hollowness of saying, well, I'm going to pray for you, which I think has become increasingly pervasive because we just have individuals that just think about thoughts and prayers as being no actions associated with that. Whereas I would argue from a biblical understanding, thoughts and prayers are usually accompanied by actions. And so, Chelsey, when you read this study, when you saw this, what were your initial thoughts?
It was like a neon sign flashing the word petty. That was my thought. This is so petty.
Okay.
Like, what a
Tell me
first
how you
world
really feel.
problem. Like, I get really riled up about this because
Really?
I represented a lot of clients
Okay.
out of Houston who needed significant FEMA relief after Hurricane Harvey. So, like, my clients lost their homes, they lost their churches, they lost everything. And for them, like, they would not be polled to say, like, do you value my prayers right now? Like, someone who is answering that question, like, it just was so frustrating to me. I'm like, we come together in these disasters. We help each other, even if it looks different. Like, we helped mosques and Jewish synagogues rebuild alongside their schools, in addition to the Christian churches we were helping, because they all equally needed FEMA relief. And so when I get into that, it's so petty. Like, people are losing their homes. Let's not talk about how much you would pay to not be prayed for in that moment. And to what you were speaking to earlier, really the faith-based community more broadly is the one providing billions and billions of dollars of relief in these scenarios. And so it's not just prayers or thoughts. Those are people who are deeply uneducated, frankly, about what the faith-based community does to support individuals being hurt. And we did a study in the state of Texas because we had to prove up why we wanted FEMA to enable faith-based entities to receive aid. That without the study showed that faith-based entities, so churches, religious schools, and nonprofits alike, Christian or otherwise, responded as first responders even before sometimes alongside policemen and firemen. They opened their church doors. They became sanctuaries for people to come and stay, Safeway places for people to stay. And so when I read stuff like that, I get frustrated because they're completely ignoring all of the good work that the faith-based community does do on others' behalf.
Are they ignoring it?
Can
or
you
they
tell
just,
I'm fiery about this?
I can tell you're
It's, like,
fiery
so
about it. I know.
petty.
I'm thinking right now, Kat, I'm like, oh yeah, now it's time to argue. And so I called it. Here's where I would argue, though. I would argue that this is it's not it's not that they're ignoring it. I would just say, and I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, they're just ignorant about it. And so the reason why I would say that they're ignorant about it is that we have a new
then don't
generation.
speak to it. So that is, I mean it pejoratively.
So-
don't speak to it. They should not be speaking to it if they don't understand the contribution the faith-based community makes.
I would have but they're cognizant of the thoughts and prayers piece because Twitter and social media puts everything out there. And so I called this in the daily briefing. I called it the Whitney Houston conundrum. So Whitney wondered, how would she know if he really loves me? But today many Americans don't know how religion really impacts them or how prayer really impacts them. 50 years ago.
So why assume the negative, though?
In the early 1990s, less than 10% of Americans lacked a formal religious affiliation. Since then, today, that number's jumped up to 25%. When you look at millennials, that number is upwards in the 35 percentile. It's not that individuals are leaving the church; it's that they're largely unfamiliar with the church. And so when they're putting a number behind it, what they're saying is that all I see is thoughts and prayers, and I'm wholly unaware of what thoughts and prayers actually are and the works that undergird that as well.
Well, what I actually picked up from this article was significant anti-Christian bias because this was atheists and humanists being interviewed for this. And the difference being there's actual animosity towards Christians because we as Christians know when my Muslim client offered a blessing over me or my Jewish client prayed over me, like I culturally respect that and have tolerance for that and like feel very, very humbled and grateful for my former clients doing that for me. But atheists don't have that same view towards Christians, right? So what if a Muslim, I would be curious if the study had a different faith entity represented, what they would have to say about those thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
Or do they just disrespect all religions?
Yeah, I don't think it's about them disrespecting all religions, Chelsey. I think it speaks to a generation of people that feel like Christians are so hollow that they, you know, the money that they do spend, they don't know it's being spent. So that there is some ignorance there.
Okay, we're gonna have to take a break right now, and I can't wait to argue, or rather robustly discuss after the break.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. In the American Legion versus AHA, the Supreme Court acknowledged that the Peace Cross was and is a religious symbol. The justices even noted that some who erected the memorial had a religious motivation in doing so. But the majority of the court rejected the idea that religious symbolism or religious meaning meant that the memorial must be destroyed. As Justice Samuel Alito wrote for the majority of the justices, even if the original purpose of a monument was infused with religion, the passage of time may obscure that sentiment. Over time, he notes, a community may preserve such monument symbols and practices for the sake of their historical significance or their place in a common cultural heritage. And as time goes by, the purposes associated with an established monument, symbol, or practice may often multiply. In other words, what was once viewed as religious may now simply be considered historical. But the passage of time makes that line more difficult to see, but that's okay. As Justice Alito explained, with sufficient time, religiously expressive monument symbols and practices can become embedded features of a community's landscape and identity. The community may come to value them without necessarily embracing their religious roots. And if it is so firmly rooted to the community, he concluded, removing it may no longer appear neutral. On the next First Liberty Briefing, let's talk about what the American Legion case means for the Lemon Test. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Kat Armstrong and Chelsey Youman. This is one of those times, ladies and gentlemen, that I wish the microphones would have been on during the commercial
and
break.
I am so glad they were not.
Because we continued the conversation, and I'm hoping to be able to recreate it now without the cuss words that Chelsey was saying. My goodness.
no,
they were
that
just
didn't
saying-
happen.
There was just
That
litany
didn't
of
happen.
cuss
Poor
words.
form.
I'm
I have
just
a
kidding.
witness.
I do.
I'm just kidding. I'm just
You
kidding
do.
with everyone. Okay, so let's continue the
My
conversation.
papa watches this show,
Yeah.
and I need you to take that back.
I'm just kidding. I am just kidding. My grandma listens in, and she knows. No, I'm just kidding. I'm full of jokes today, bad ones at that. Let's continue the conversation, Kat. So, your thoughts on here's where I'll just say it, and you can respond. I think largely non-religious individuals, the reason why they're willing to pay more is because they're unfamiliar with the claims of Christ. They're unfamiliar with the Christianity. It's not that they were leaving the church. It's that they were never there. And when they're never there, what you only see what the media is portraying. You only see what's making the headlines. And ever since the beginning of time, the media has followed the dictum, if it bleeds, it leads. And we can all say there's been some bad PR for the church here in Texas, here across the U.S., across the world, relative to the abuse scandals that have continued to perpetuate in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Houston Chronicle publicized a lot about it, Washington Post, etc. So there's that piece. If you only know that, and then the second piece is built upon that is you think it's the church is you don't trust the church to be the church, what we don't understand. So this goes back to this study that was put out by Pew 50 years ago. 68% of Americans had confidence in the church to do the right thing, to add a positive benefit to the community. That number now has dropped over 20 points to 42% today. So thoughts?
Of course it has. The public has no implicit trust in the church that it will benefit our community. And I don't think it's just about headlines. I think that our leaders have lost integrity, and we see the headlines. They only prove what a lot of people instinctually knew to be true, that there is a lot of power and money wrapped up in the church, and they don't represent the ways of Christ. So when you've got a long history of experiencing that, a hollowness to the way of Christ or the words of Christ, then you do receive someone's prayer in a very antagonistic way. You will say, no, thank you. I don't have any part of that. And I think what I agree with Chelsey on is that the church has always been on the front lines, always, for all of history. We are making a difference. We are doing good. I don't think they know that. But I think the deeper issue from a pastoral level, I look at that response and I have compassion and I think, wow, how much trust is eroded and how do we earn it back? And will it be by writing a big check, or will it be on the ground, really repairing relationships and showing that we're good for the community?
Yeah. Thoughts, Chelsey?
I mean, I agree with aspects of what you both have already said. That's a really great way to look at it from a heart standpoint. Why would someone have that kind of reaction to a Christian? It would be out of hurt from the church, or a dissatisfaction there, or disillusionment maybe. But at the end of the day, I think all we can do as Christians is be the church and be community and continue to do what my clients did all the time, which is open their doors to people from all walks, provide food for people, become shelters to people, and help people. And if people can't look at that and recognize that for the good that it is and want to pick it apart and call it hypocrisy, then that's willful blindness on their part. And I mean, that's really all I have to say about it.
I think there's I think the reason where my response comes from I want to put the onus upon the church in this sense, and not upon other churches, but considering myself as the church, is to understand, like, I'm holding these two ideas in my head, like here in Texas in particular, because most of our audience is here in Texas right now, unless you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, or you're in Minnesota, because Minnesota's also hearing this. So for our Texas audience, we're keenly aware of those yellow vans that have the Jesus fish on the side, the Texas Baptist men that they are quite literally some of the first individuals that respond in tragedies. I can't tell you how many emails I get that I am happy they populate my inbox, or the calls that I get from other Texas Baptists that when a tragedy comes, they're looking for help in these areas. And I know that they're to be trusted. Like, without fail, I know without doubt, Texas Baptist men are an institution that does tremendous good, not only here in the area, but also across the U.S. Keenly aware of that. And the numbers bear that out, as well as the great PR that gets it. When you see one of those stinking bright yellow vans or trailers in some of these shots after a tragedy, you know the Texas Baptist men have decided that they are going to be some of the first ones there, that not only are they going to be good hearts that help, they're also going to be competent hands that can help as well. So they're not just getting in the way. They're good people that are competent to be able to do necessary work on the ground after a disaster. I am also aware, next sentence, of the Houston Chronicle reports that came out earlier this year. I'm also aware of some of the detrimental and just evil things that have been done by individuals within the very same Texas Baptist churches that those Texas Baptist men serve at. And so that's where I find myself understanding why a non-religious person would pay $3.54 to avoid a Christian stranger, because who knows if that Christian stranger has not empowered silence from an individual as well. That's where I find this tension of understanding both. Like I completely understand what you said, Chelsey, and we've continued to cite study after study of just the tremendous amount of good that comes from religion, not only in the time of disaster, but also during time of just normalcy, contributing to the economy. But I'm also keenly aware of the hurt that's caused, which is a small, minuscule, but it's still hurt. Thoughts?
I think I just get back to, for me, it being about tolerance and respect for other individuals from different faith, from different walks of life, from different belief systems, maybe even different socioeconomic backgrounds. If any individual was ever to share a kind or comforting word with me, I would never reject it. I just don't understand that animosity. That's not a neutral, right? We're not talking about the neutral category where people are neutral towards religion. We're talking about those who have a level of animosity, and whether that stems from hurt or, frankly, what I've seen in a lot of scenarios, just cynicism, a desire to take down the church and animosity towards the church. And I think that category particularly irks me, because in the debates I've had with atheists, there's been no reasoning on the rationalizing side where you say, well, these are the benefits and these are the tangibles. There's no actual ever acknowledgement of the good. It's all about the negative and wanting to call out hypocrisy. I mean, so many entities, including the media outlets that we see, they love a scandal. Nothing is more famous on TV than a good church scandal. I'm not saying that the church doesn't have its own part in hypocrisy to own, but we are a failed human institution, the Big C church. And with that, there are going to be failures. There's going to be sin, but I just would hope that anyone could be respectful and tolerant of others' viewpoints. And like I said, when my Muslim clients give a blessing over my unborn child when I was pregnant, like, I took that and felt so honored. And I would never say, like, because you're not the faith that I like or that I want to be associated with, please save it. It's just, I will never be that person. I was so honored by that.
Well, we have got to take a break, but when we come back from the break, we're going to continue the conversation. I want to hone in on some really good news that is populating the headlines right now. The idea, or the new numbers relative to the number of abortions that have been performed here in the U.S. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll also talk about the climate crisis. We've got a teenager, 16-year-old, that is shaming world leaders up in New York right now. She's made the 2-week journey on her carbon-free emission boat and has made her way over here, and how individuals, it's been interesting to see the responses, but we have got to take a break right now. But when we come back from the break, more from Point of View right after this.
When you give to Point of View, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dies would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kirby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penn Dexter and Kirby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy, but if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Join the Truth Team and boldly stand for truth in a world of lies, distortion, and information manipulation. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this Tuesday, September 24th, 2019 day. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. And before we get started, I just have to tell you, happy Punctuation Day, period. Happy Voter Registration Day, exclamation point. I'm so grateful that you've decided to join us on this Point of View show. We have got quite a show for you today. We're going to be talking a little bit about a wide assortment of topics, everything from the news out that the number of abortions that are being performed is down. We're going to kind of dig down a little bit deeper because we've got an expert here with us in Chelsey, Youman, to help us understand why those numbers might be down as well. We'll be talking about the climate crisis. We've got a teenager up in New York right now that is shaming world leaders. And what does that speak to what's happening in the world today? We'll be talking a little bit about the vape crisis, I should say, or just the pandemonium that has been spreading across the U.S. about individuals that are vaping. And now we have new policies and ideas and initiatives that are being put forward to try to squelch vaping across the U.S. And then we'll also be talking about Jesus walking, specifically the artist Kanye West and Kim Kardashian West coming out with the news last week indicating that Kanye West is now a born-again Christian. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that and more here on the Millennial Roundtable today. And joining me at the Millennial Roundtable is an assortment of excellent co-hosts. And so where should we? Let's start with one. We've got Human Coalition Action's the very own Chelsey Youman. Chelsey, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing good today.
So good to have you here. We've also got Kat Armstrong of Polished Ministries. Kat, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
So good. And then we've also joining us Jasmine Tate. Jasmine, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
So good. And I am the male voice here today. And I am
good luck, Nick.
How does it feel?
I am greatly intimidated right now.
You should. Welcome to our world.
Oh, there it is. I knew it was coming. So here's the funny. Here's a side note anecdotal story, and then we'll talk about the abortion issue, abortion numbers that are going down. I was there's this group that I meet with on Sunday, once a month on Sunday nights, and we go through. I'll write up a white paper, and then we'll talk about it from a Christian perspective. So everything from radical Islam to North Korea. And then 1 month, I wrote a paper on the history of feminism here in the U.S. And so I documented the three waves that have moved forward and kind of the fourth that is beginning to emerge right now. But I let it off with a joke because there's obviously women in this group. And I said, I'm intimately acquainted right now that I'm mansplaining feminism to you all. And so whenever I'm wrong on this, please let me know and just shut me down. And one of the things that was said, not compliments, there's no compliments that are made because I was a part of it. One of the things that was said was talking about just how you become intimately acquainted with your femininity when you're in a highly male world. And I just thought, I've never been. I mean, I've been in places where I am the only. Like, it's not. I was like, I take that, but I guess I'm just weird in that I'm not really. I don't see it. Then no less than the next day, go to a boxing class that morning. I go to a boxing class the next morning, and nothing. There's only girls in that class. Not even the teacher was a girl. Even the person that was checking us in was a girl. I was the only person in that whole building at 6 a.m. that was a male in that boxing class. And then I sent them all a text message at the very end. It's like, okay, you win. That was 1 hour of 24 hours, 7 days a week. And
like, who did you box?
No,
a girl?
No.
Wow,
I did
Nick,
my first.
how could you?
Oh, this is uncomfortable. No, it was a heavy bag. There was a heavy bag.
All right.
So I was the least aggressive person in that, in that room, and I still couldn't.
It's hard to believe.
So you're laughing at it now, so it's okay though. Okay, I'm not hurt. Well, I am so glad that you all are joining us today, and so what we're going to do is I want us to jump off with some really great news that America's abortion rate has dropped to its lowest level ever. And so the Institute estimated that there were about 862,000 abortions in 2017. That's nearly 200,000 fewer than in 2011. The abortion rate, the number of abortions per 1,000 women of reproductive age, dropped to 13.5 in 2017 from 16.9 in 2011. That's the lowest abortion rate since abortion became legal nationwide in 1973. And so, Chelsey, at Human Coalition Action, you're doing great work from a governmental perspective to help lower these rates. Your thoughts on this?
Well, obviously, it's just really exciting news. I always think that we still have a long way to go because that's still over 800,000 children lost. But I think that our culture is changing on this issue. I mean, we know statistically speaking that people are more pro-life than ever. The millennials are the most pro-life generation that have ever happened. And lots of that is thanks to good work in the pro-life movement from before us, but that that science is catching up with what we've known to be true, which is those are human children, not quite fully developed, but they're still human. And science and sonogram technology and 3D sonograms. I heard a statistic that in the Valley, there's a group that will do 4D sonograms now.
Wow.
And out of 900 4D sonograms with women considering abortion, only 2 continued with an abortion. Because there's something undeniable about really seeing your child and hearing your child's heartbeat and that being a part of you. And I think that culture is catching up with that. But I also don't want to overinflate the positivity of this statistic just simply because what we also know to be a growing trend in the abortion movement, unfortunately, is back alley abortions. And that's done through ordering abortions illegally online internationally. So there are multiple groups. I think that we're at 100,000 abortions in the last few years at different websites I won't name on air, that basically they never see a doctor. The girl goes online. We're a digital age. She gets a prescription filled by an international doctor who this prescription's filled in a pharmacy in India, and it goes straight from the India pharmacy to her doorstep. She never has to leave her house and can have an at-home, quote unquote, self-contained abortion.
Yeah.
And that is a growing trend, and one that I don't know that all these statistics actually account for because there's no way to fully account for those. It's dangerous in the sense that they're not FDA-approved drugs. So we don't actually know what's in the drugs. The FDA sent a cease and desist letter 2 weeks ago to one of these groups. But telemedicine is a huge problem and a growing trend, and one at Human Coalition Action that, we definitely have our eye on because we want women to be not isolated during this time of their life. And for those who don't know, we also have a clinic side at Human Coalition. So that's our nonprofit side. We partner with 43 clinics across the country who are serving women in their desperate time of need, getting them childcare help, housing help, away from domestic abuse issues. We do job training, really a support system. And once they engage that support system, they understand and feel empowered to make the choice to keep their child. And so I think it's really important to also understand these statistics might not account for really the new trends in abortion.
Yeah, and when we come back from the break, we're going to continue to hear from Kat and Jasmine, their initial thoughts on this, but also I want us to dig a little bit deeper and try to understand what it is that's accounting for kind of this drop in the number of abortions. I read one article out of The Guardian that talked about a UK website. Their document indicates that upwards of 4,000 abortions that have been happened over 3 years through this telemedicine. So we'll be back, though, right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A year ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of Colorado baker Jack Phillips, the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop. When asked to design a wedding cake for a same-sex couple, he declined. The Colorado Civil Rights Commission declared that he was in violation of the state's Anti-Discrimination Act. Although the court ruled in his favor, a number of Christian attorneys and leaders lamented that it was a narrow ruling. The justices didn't really address the larger issues of whether any business can refuse service on the basis of religious objection. But I found that often Supreme Court decisions are like falling dominoes. Other judges get the message, and we can begin to see the dominoes falling in favor of religious liberty rather than against it. Two examples illustrate this. Last month, the U.S. Court of Appeals ruled in favor of two videographers in Minnesota who produce commercials, live events, and other videos. They declined to produce a wedding video for a same-sex couple based on their religious beliefs. Last week, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled in favor of two Christian artists who design wedding invitations. They were asked to custom design material for a same-sex ceremony but declined. The court made it clear that their ruling was limited to the two artists and not a blanket exemption from the ordinance for all other business operations. But not every court seemed to have received the message. The Washington State Supreme Court ruled against florist Barronelle Stutzman, who declined to provide a flower arrangement for a same-sex ceremony. The U.S. Supreme Court vacated the ruling and ordered the state Supreme Court to reconsider the case in light of the Masterpiece Cake Shop decision. But the state court's judges came back with the same decision, so she wants the U.S. Supreme Court to reconsider her case. I believe the justices need to take up her case and send a strong, clear message. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. So grateful that you have joined us today on Point of View. And we have been talking about news of the abortion rate has dropped to its lowest rate ever. Institute estimated that there were 862,000 abortions in 2017. That's lower than 200,000 lower abortions that were performed than 2011. And as for the rate drop, it was 13.5 in 2017 for every 1,000 reproductive women of reproductive age, dropped to 16.9, or was at 16.9 in 2011, now at 13.5. It's the lowest since abortion has become legal here in the U.S. And so when you hear that news, Kat, let's go to you. Initial thoughts, impressions on hearing that the abortion rate has dropped.
Yeah, I'm with Chelsey on this. I'm really encouraged to hear that less babies are dying. I just had a lot of questions about the medical abortion that were mentioned in the article. It said that 60% of women under that 10-week mark were utilizing the two medications that can induce an abortion. And so because we can't track those, I'm not too sure that the statistics are as encouraging as they seem. Mm-hmm. But of course, I'm going to celebrate when children are alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And Jasmine, we'll go to you. Initial impressions on abortion rate dropping to its lowest rate ever.
Same. I would say, obviously, you have to celebrate the progress, but there's only so much you can celebrate when there's still babies dying, you know? And so I'm wondering about just my culture is my jam. I love music and movies and stuff like that. And so obviously recently there's been a surge, if you will, of this conversation in the media, in the arts, movies, different things coming up. And so I'm processing. I'm wondering if that's adding to it, just the conversation coming up so much, it being kind of a forefront topic right now, or at least in the last year or so, it's a forefront topic.
Yeah, because I like Jasmine's alluded, there's a variety of different places in the culture and industries and sectors in the culture where this is becoming more of a conversation. And so I would be interested to know you all's perspective on what you think, what's accounting for this drop. And so like I tipped my hand a little bit during the break, and I came up with 3 things that I think that's resulting in the drop. I think there's less sex that's happening across the U.S. I think quicker internet speeds is another piece. And then I think more stringent state laws. Chelsey, this might be of interest, and I'm going to turn it over to you. So concerning stricter state laws, in 2017 was a banner year for states when it came to abortion, pro-life legislation. 19 states adopted 63 new restrictions on abortion rights and access. That's the largest number since that 2013. And so there's studies out that we can point to about the quicker internet access. We'll let our minds wander a little bit. That's has caused a decrease in the amount of sex that's happening, but also just a 2017 study, Americans are having less sex, and obviously if they're having less sex, there's less of a chance for an abortion to be performed. So when you hear about the abortion rate drop, you're familiar with this topic. What are some of those identifiers? What are you looking to that you're thinking, okay, this is one of the reasons why there's been that drop?
I think there's frankly a lot of conjecture. So first, I want to be careful anytime we cite statistics, remembering the source, because the source of these statistics is Guttmacher Institute. Guttmacher Institute is a pro-abortion statistical think tank. So when you say things like that many regulations on abortion have been passed, well, some of those I wouldn't call regulations on abortion. Some of those are things like sterilizing instruments or requiring certain procedures to be medically in line with the medical community standards. Yeah. So some of these laws that are being challenged, I mean, in the Fifth Circuit, there are literally laws being challenged that sterilization of the medical items that's being challenged, which I'm like, you can't tell me you found a client who doesn't want her instruments sterilized. Right. So there's a lot of gamesmanship on the other side of this. So I'm always just very careful about how we look at these statistics. But overall, I do think on the culture side, we understand more than ever. And that, like I said earlier, the medical knowledge has caught up with what we've known to be true, which is these are human beings. And we've also seen an increase in contraceptive use. For all of the left's favorite talking point, which is clinics are shutting down across the country, I think it's also very important to note that there are actually more abortion clinics now than there were then. So we've seen an uptick in abortion clinics. Now, those are in a lot of times more pro-abortion states, but we still have some big ground to take back in the abortion movement. We have lots of work to do on behalf of women, really, because 75% of the women, I say this all the time, 75% of the women in our clinics say if their circumstances were more stabilized, they would choose to keep their child. Mm-hmm. And what that tells me is these are women who are desperate and under duress and don't feel that they have a real choice. 60% of women say they might be getting an abortion because someone's pressuring them to. Mm. So really, our goal is to empower women to stabilize their circumstances so that they don't return to that same situation over and over again. And I think it's also to remember that the women having abortions typically live below the poverty line and they already have a child, which means I think it's important to know who these women are that we're talking about. These are real women who, if they have to afford childcare on the hour-by-hour wage salary they're making, they don't eat that month, or they're homeless. And so housing and childcare are major issues that we need to resolve. And I think that's something our community and country needs to come around and start working on social services that help these women and get these numbers even lower.
Yeah, it's hard to dream about a future with a child when you can't even live in the present. And so how do you continue to build out and to strengthen and solidify that social fabric that we've got? Kat, when you're hearing, when you hear about the numbers that are lowering, what are your thoughts relative to why it's lowering?
Yeah, I picture my friend Cecily Smith's face. She is the founder of Abide Women's Healthcare in Southern Dallas here, and she works in a maternotoxic zone, which it's unsafe for pregnant women to raise a child. It is a food desert. You cannot get food. You have to get on a bus. They do not have a car. They do not have money for childcare. Their situation is such that they don't want to bring another child into this world because they cannot keep that child alive. So when I hear these statistics, I put a face on it, and I see Cecily, who's doing the good work of the gospel in a place that needs it the most. And I also think that her voice is one that's impacting our generation through the AND campaign. She's spoken several times. She is pro-life, but she also is quick to connect the dots, as Chelsey has just done, to poverty. And so I think the millennials are going to make a huge play on the pro-life movement, because we will seek justice, not just from one avenue. We're going to look at it holistically. That's what Chelsey's describing. That's what Abide Women's Healthcare is doing.
That's one of the things, because again, this is oversimplistic, I know that it is. And Jasmine, I'm coming to you after this, what you have relative to why it's dropping. But when you look at that, their pro-life has been largely an issue that's been championed by the right. But when you look to some of those social services, that's more of an issue that's been championed by the political left. And so I think this is a place where we can start to see some synergy that's beginning to develop of how can individuals that are pro-life in nature begin to work alongside and synergistically work on both sides of the aisle to be able to not only fight for the child in the womb, but also fight for it until it gets to the tomb as well. And so your thoughts, Jasmine?
I agree with Kat. What Kat was just sharing. Sorry, we just met, so I'm just making sure I got the right name. But I agree with what she was saying. I think the millennial generation is special in a sense of there's a holistic approach, a holistic view that's being offered. There's laws that need to be passed, and that's amazing. But I think there's so much more to the conversation that I think if we're willing to dive into the poverty conversation in these communities and just the state of our living, how people are living life, the things that lead people into those places. I think that's major. And then I'll say too, I think people like these women in this room being voices and being put in positions like this show to be able to talk about these topics. I think it's major. My mom, that's part of her story. That's part of her testimony. And I'm always like, Mom, she shares it with us as a family, but I'm always like, man, share that story, share the testimony, share the experience. Because I think there's so much power in voices coming up that can talk about the experience and be positioned in leadership positions, in community, in government, in all these other places, in the church, that I think play a major role in that. So
that's phenomenal. And so we have got to take a break right now. But when we come back from the break, more on the drop in the number of abortions. I'll be interested. I want to tease out this topic a little bit more because I realize that I'm surrounded by brilliant individuals that I think can speak on this a lot more. And so we're going to take a break right now. But before we go to the break, I want to direct your attention to a couple of items on Point of View website. So you can go to www.pointofview.net to find out more information on not only these individuals, but also on some of the news items that we'll be talking about today. And we will be back right after this.
So when people first hear about Medi-Share, they have questions. Some good ones, like, what is it? Well, Medi-Share is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry. It's not health insurance. It's a different way of doing things, which leads us to this question. Why do so many become Medi-Share members? Two big reasons. They save a lot. The typical family saves $500 a month, and they feel great about it. With Medi-Share, you aren't forced to pay for things you don't believe in. Find out more. 855-SHARE-40. That's 855-SHARE-40.
It seems we can't get through a day without hearing how science has been corrupted to support political goals. Media entities have sold out truth for the sake of favored narratives. Even some religious groups have abandoned the Bible to support things based on feelings. So who can you trust? Kirby Anderson and the Point of View Truth Team are your source for real news. Learn how you can make a difference by joining the team at pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. In a world of unending fog, Point of View is a shining light. Do your part at pointofview.net/team or 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined by an August. I've been wanting to say August more lately because every time I hear... I read a book and used it.
Oh, man.
And I just never hear it
This
said.
is like a scene from Clueless. Is this
really?
your word of the week? You're trying to work it in? Okay.
Do y'all know? Okay, so these are like my little nerdy things that I do have a word a week I try to work in. But nevertheless, it's just, I'm weird.
I think you meant August.
No, it's Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I've got one thing that I've got to say before we move forward. I've got to say thank you. As you know, last week we had the truth team here at Point of View, and we were very explicit in asking for your help for us to be, since we are a ministry, we are fully operational because of your generosity. And last week we were reminded yet again of how generous you are, and I want to make sure that you realize how grateful we are. I know my words will not convey and fully capture how much your generosity has meant to us as well as the entire team that you can't see here at Point of View. And so I want to take some time to say thank you to you. But there have been some of you that have been wondering, can we still give, and can we still get some of that cool stuff that you were highlighting? And the answer is yes. And so want to illuminate a couple of items that if you were to give at $50 a month at that level, we were going to send you 2 items. And so if you're watching on Facebook right now, this is actually the good part of the Facebook Live feed because I'm blocking my face. And you can get you can get this Holy Bible, which is a Life Essentials Study Bible by Gene Getz. It's got over 1,000 biblical principles that are drawn from the scriptures, highlighted within the pages of scripture. And so we will send you this if you commit to being a $50 a month supporter of Point of View. And then also, what's Bible reading without a Yeti tumbler? And so is that not... I'm embarrassed for myself.
I want a Yeti. I'm not going to lie.
So we've got this Yeti tumbler. So if you are like me, who sweats when he drinks coffee too quickly, this is going to keep your drinks nice and cold. And so or if you're someone that just prefers hot drinks, this will keep it nice and warm for a significant period of time. And so if you support Point of View at the $50 a month level, we will send you this, a Bible, and then a Yeti tumbler as well, to be reminded that he is the living water, and he who drinks of him will never thirst again. But we are going to continue on with the show because I really want us to talk a little bit about teenagers shaming world leaders. And so let's make our way up to New York, shall we? And so Greta Thunberg, who is the climate change activist from Sweden, Swedish climate activist, 16-year-old Greta Thunberg and 15 other children filed a complaint with the United Nations Monday, alleging that 5 of the world's leading economies have violated their human rights by not taking adequate action to stop the unfolding climate crisis. According to Greta, quote, "I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?" She continues on and she says, "You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying." The petition names 5 countries in particular: Germany, France, Brazil, Argentina, and Turkey, which they say have failed to uphold their obligations under the Convention on the Rights of Child, a 30-year-old human rights treaty which was most widely ratified in history. Chelsey, initial thoughts?
Can you give me the background on, what is she talking about?
So
Can you
Greta,
give the background on that?
I would argue that Greta is she is the leader of the youth movement that is trying to address the climate crisis. And so she traveled on a sailboat that I think was like carbon emission free of some degree.
Okay, so it's all about the environment. It's not about
all about the environment,
disease
climate crisis.
or Because she convoluted that, so I did get a little confused.
Yeah, so all about the environment. So the part about people are suffering and dying, there's some estimates, according to certain studies, that indicate that 100 million people could be forced into extreme poverty due to the climate crisis. Some estimates indicate from the World Health Organization predicted approximately 250,000 people could die each year due to climate change here in the upcoming future. Thoughts?
I have a few. Thanks for starting with me.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I mean, my first thought was, wow, the level of boldness on these kids.
I love the
I mean, these
GIFs
are some like world changers.
Yeah.
This is my mama heart speaking out. But in a lot of ways misguided, right? So there's like a huge debate that yes, the climate is changing. Yes, that is having catastrophic, perhaps, effects on entire populations. I know that one of the children that attended is from Alaska and signed on and talked about how it's affected his community and their ability to hunt and fish. And so I don't want to at all downplay potential ramifications. The question has always come down to like, what is the human footprint on that? Like, what's the actual ability for humanity to control the climate? And so I will be the first to confess that I'm relatively ignorant of these issues, but so I can't speak too much to all of that, but I will say that anytime a 15-year-old chastises a bunch of adults, I don't know. I would like to have seen her be that excited about saving the unborn or that excited about getting vaccinations to remote parts of Africa or water to parts of Africa or food to any third world countries. I mean, there's a whole host of humanitarian crises out there. And if we have to compete for our resources and time and energy and attention, there are some to me that are more dire, which she admitted herself in her speech. So I don't think that's too harsh of me to say that, yes, there are actual children dying out there. And so you built this boat, and we're a lucky one to be able to do that and not fly commercial and come across the ocean to chastise adults. But I would love this attention to be on some actual life and death issues or disease-related issues.
Okay. Thoughts, Kat?
I love Greta.
Yeah?
I'm one of her biggest fans. If my 16-year-old child had the passion and integrity in which she speaks truth to power, I would be one lucky mama. I love that she is a world changer. I love that she is cautioning the politicians that are making regulations on our emissions to do better. They can do better. I love that she brings female excellence. I love that she provides excellence for those with Asperger's and suffering with OCD. I thought her TED Talk was revolutionary. I love that she went on Trevor Noah and held her own and talked about the integrity in which she moves forward these ideas. So she didn't fly on a plane to get here because she is so passionate. And so I like that. The civil disobedience aspect of what she's doing reminds me of Shua and Pua, the ladies in Exodus that were saving children against, the law. And so I think that she is a great example of female excellence, Asperger excellence, and civil disobedience at its best. I can't help but think about the garden motif in the scriptures. The narrative is so entrenched in the garden metaphor. I mean, creation happens in the garden. The fall happens in the garden. Redemption happens in a garden. And the new heaven and new earth is a new garden. So I would be one of those who gets super passionate about our environment and how connected it is to gospel matters. And what Greta would say is that this is fact. This is facts.
Yeah.
And so she's creating awareness, and I like it.
Okay. Jasmine, your thoughts?
Yeah. I don't have a lot of thoughts. I will be the second to admit that I don't know a lot about this issue at hand. But I will say, anytime you see a group of young people passionately talking about a scenario like this or an issue like this, I haven't watched the entire video of Greta, but I just felt convicted seeing the clips that I saw of just how can she be this passionate about it and I not know anything really about this topic? I felt kind of convicted of I need to do some research about this. I need to dig in a little bit. There's an issue that's deeply moving this generation, the next generation, and I don't really know anything about it. So I'll be the second to admit that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to bow to plants. We just saw that in the news with Union Theological Seminary. I'm not going to do that.
For sure.
But I'm excited to see someone speaking out.
I still get back to a little bit, though. It was a little entitled. Like, the first thought I had besides, wow, they're like really brave for doing this, was like, there needs to be a broader understanding, if this is your issue, like how certain countries function and on their economics, and like the importance that the oil industry and coal industry do have. And there's alternative. I mean, there are whole ecosystems and countries that are doing the best they can. And it's a little bit of an entitled perspective to me to say, like, do it our way, because that's a first world way to do it, really, if you have money and time and resources and research abilities. Anyways, I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, so when we come back from the break, because I'll probably disagree, and I'm going to disagree. I'll go against three women. Like, I'll disagree. I'm so impassioned, so encouraged by Greta, but I'm very concerned about what she's pushing forward. And so we will be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. In the American Legion versus AHA, the Supreme Court acknowledged that the Peace Cross was and is a religious symbol. The justices even noted that some who erected the memorial had a religious motivation in doing so. But the majority of the court rejected the idea that religious symbolism or religious meaning meant that the memorial must be destroyed. As Justice Samuel Alito wrote for the majority of the justices, even if the original purpose of a monument was infused with religion, the passage of time may obscure that sentiment. Over time, he notes, a community may preserve such monument symbols and practices for the sake of their historical significance or their place in a common cultural heritage. And as time goes by, the purposes associated with an established monument, symbol, or practice may often multiply. In other words, what was once viewed as religious may now simply be considered historical. But the passage of time makes that line more difficult to see, but that's okay. As Justice Alito explained, with sufficient time, religiously expressive monument symbols and practices can become embedded features of a community's landscape and identity. The community may come to value them without necessarily embracing their religious roots. And if it is so firmly rooted to the community, he concluded, removing it may no longer appear neutral. On the next First Liberty Briefing, let's talk about what the American Legion case means for the Lemon Test. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your host, Nick Pitts, and so we have been talking about Miss Greta. I'm saying Miss Greta because, one, she is just a very powerful woman, and two, because I'm not quite sure how to pronounce her last name. And so, and this shows you, like, and this is probably the most recurring problem that I cover. One, it's my Tennesseeness. I just stumble over words, and I'm not very good at enunciation.
Why don't you go ahead and try it,
though? Two is like I read news. I don't necessarily watch the news. And by necessarily watch the news, I mean, I don't know how to work my TV, and it's probably a good thing because I like to read more, and I always feel guilty for watching TV. And so I just don't know how to pronounce names. And so this is probably a funny point too. Like, I pronounced Voldemort wrong. Like, when I read Harry Potter, I mispronounced all of their words. Like, Hermione was Hermione in my head.
Mine was Hermione.
Yes. So I don't enunciate well. And so when I'm actually put on the spot to actually pronounce names, to you all who can't see my face but only can hear my voice, you find that this guy's just an idiot. Well, no, I just read it and then I don't give attention to how you actually pronounce it. And so it's Greta Thunberg, as best as I can understand. And so she has pushed forward. She is the 16-year-old Swedish climate activist that has made her voice known on the world stage. You'll remember she was giving so many rallies over in Europe over a month ago, and really for a longer period of time. She took a 2-week journey over here to the U.S., and she was an organizer on this past Friday, where some numbers indicate upwards of 4 million people walked out and protested climate action. Now, here's where I will differentiate from. I'll be nuanced, and then I'll let you all just eviscerate me, if you so please. And so here's where I want to say yes and amen. I believe in a beautiful free speech. Love how this 16-year-old Greta, I love how she is able to articulate and make a point in the public square. I think this is the beauty of America. I think this is one of the joys that the internet has given us, is allowed individuals to be able to have a voice, as they always have, but to have it heard on a massive level. I think this is a great thing. Where I would disagree with Greta is I do not think I would not say that the problem is as red alarm as what she has made it out to be. There are certain estimates that indicate that the world, unless something drastic happens in the next 18 months, according to one study, the International Climate, something along those lines, unless something happens 18 months or in 12 years, the world is destined to end. It's very alarming. And
it's destined to end in 12 years.
Yeah. And so there is I disagree about that, because I understand that there is, but from a Christian perspective, regardless of if the world is going to end or not, the Christian perspective is very clear. I'm to cultivate, I'm to steward the planet regardless of whatever the terminating date of this planet is. And I have an ecclesiology that says the planet's not going to terminate, that my God is coming to redeem all things. Hence the reason why creation is groaning for redemption right now. It's not groaning so that God can destroy it and put heaven here. It's groaning because it's going to be redeemed and heaven's going to crash into here. It's going to be a beautiful thing. So that's just I'm showing my ecclesiology. I'm showing my eschatological cards, I should say. And so this is where, and Jared Diamond has really informed my thinking here. Jared Diamond, he wrote Guns, Steel, and Germs. He wrote Collapse. I think one of the great points that he has, and this is a quote that I used this morning in the daily briefing, people often ask, what is the single most important environmental population problem facing the world today? A flip answer would be the single most important problem is our misguided focus on identifying the single most important problem. I think there are a variety of issues that we can address, and I regardless of whatever the science is indicating, because there's science that backs up both sides, I think it's very clear that there's some very good things that are happening right now. The U.S. has lowered their emissions significantly over the past 4 years. And there's a lot of good initiatives that are happening in the private sector as well that we can begin to talk through. Realize I've talked way too much because they're glaring eyes. Everyone's glaring eyes. And so let's go ahead and let's open it up. And so Kat, I want to lead off with you. I'm leading off with you, Kat. I'm gonna deviate from Chelsey right now. You're on the climate change, coming from a Christian perspective, DTS grad. Help us to understand from a theological standpoint. There is would you say that there's a theology rooted in how we need to steward the planet?
100%.
Yeah.
It's the first thing he told us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's all throughout the scriptures. You can't get away from the garden metaphor. It's in every part of the 4 parts of the meta narrative of scripture. If you take the scriptures seriously, you have to care about the environment.
Yep.
Christians make it a lesser issue. Traditionally, that's been because we have rejected a lot of science, and I'll go there, because now we're seeing the pro-life movement is gaining some traction because we're finally accepting the truth about what science is telling us. They are humans. The same thing is going to start happening with climate change and emissions and regulations and taking care of the environment, is that Christians are going to accept that scientists are correct that things are getting worse. Now, I'm with you. The world isn't going to end. I don't have a specific date. I think that would be wildly inappropriate to guess on what the date would be, because we know how the story ends. But I think that we have a biblical imperative and an ethical responsibility to take care of the world.
Okay. Jasmine, thoughts?
I just love that so much. And like I said earlier, I'm guilty of what you just said. Like I was not taught to think about environment at all. Like, let's talk about all these other issues. And anyway, I'm just listening, and I'm just like, I still feel convicted. I'm like, Lord, I need to learn more about this specific topic. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening right now or watching right now that this is an issue that the church has not talked about. And anyway, so I'm like just watching you guys have this conversation, to be honest, because I'm so intrigued by all of this right now.
Chelsey, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I actually want to give Christians some credit that I think a lot of Christians understand the need that we were given this earth to have dominion over it and the animals and to steward it. And I don't know that it is something I've heard much talked about from the pulpit, because it's not always necessarily a moral issue or a heart issue. I think of it as generally a life issue. And so I do think that Christians should not concede the moral ground on the environment because it's an easy one, right? Lots of Christians understand the need that this is a place of limited time, limited resources, and we should steward it well. And we are probably, as millennials, some of the younger generations to be the furthest removed from agriculture and the environment than most older generations. And so I don't want to attribute our experience to make it the norm, because, my grandpa is still a farmer and still farms full time, and every generation before his did that. And so we are actually further removed from the environment, being in urban centers and growing up in cities and, with subsidized farming. That's not as much a part of our heritage and culture. But Nick is giving me some really weird looks right now. All that to say, I don't want to concede the moral ground on this. Yes, we should take care of our environment. I will always be skeptical about the science that says we can control it by this much. And like I said, it's just not my issue. I think that there are other issues I care more deeply about that have vastly more important implications. Life and death, sickness, children, women, all of those are issues that, when it comes to physical harm, the consequences of that to me are more dire than the consequences of some of this unproven science or the back and forth science. And so for me, I'm going to head to where the biggest fire burning is.
Yeah, it's a matter of priority.
Right.
And so they're placing climate crisis at a higher priority than the life issue, or at a higher priority than poverty. And so my face was because I had a bad joke that was bottled up inside of me, and
thank you for not saying it.
I've missed the opportunity. But I've got to tend to my Farmville on my Facebook, so we've got to go to a break. And so we will be back right after this.
It is a horrible scenario, but it happens. Dennis writes about his wife who was diagnosed with leukemia. She's now a 2-time survivor. They ran up over $1 million in medical bills. Thankfully, they're Medishare members, and Dennis says they're so thankful for that, how people came together to meet their needs. Medishare works, and it can save you a lot of money. The typical family saves $500 a month. Find out more. Call 855-SHARE-40. That's 855-SHARE-40.
Every day we face new challenges. At the time of Jonah, the Bible says in Nineveh, they couldn't tell their right hand from their left. But in America today, a bunch of people can't tell men from women. In fact, some say men can be women. Christians are called to proclaim God's truth in every area of life. But who has time to study every crazy new thing the world can think of? I'm glad you asked. Get the information you need every day with Kirby's Viewpoints commentary. Sign up to receive them via email at pointofview.net/viewpoints or find them on the Point of View radio app. Viewpoints commentaries, making sense of the world around us. pointofview.net/viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, on this Tuesday, September 24th, 2019 day. So grateful that you have decided to join us. And joining me at the Millennial Roundtable, we have the one and only Jasmine Tate here for the second hour. Jasmine, how are you?
I'm doing good.
So, I mean, we were in the arena just for the past hour. I mean, you've lost three. I mean, you got stuck with me. Kat has left. Chelsey has left, and so you got. I don't know what the short straw is you drew, but nevertheless, here we are.
They were all geniuses. So
I know. They're too smart for me, and so I just smile and nod and try to not get in their way. And so, but nevertheless, we are going to continue the show. We've got a couple of topics that we'll be talking about in this upcoming hour. Specifically, I want to hone in on vaping, and so there has been some regulations that have been kind of introduced, and there's been a general movement that is I don't know, hysteria is not the right word. There has been great momentum. It's almost been like a wave of support toward banning these e-cigarettes and vapes, individuals that are vaping. And it has just been shocking to see how quickly this has moved from just from isolated incidences and stories to now just this huge move to have the government ban this vaping, which is originally intended to help individuals stop smoking. And now we have individuals that are largely moving to ban this. And so we'll look at some of the science, look at some of the numbers behind that. I will tell you, though, I was just introduced to one number right before I came over here this morning, and it found that 1 in 10 eighth graders are vaping. I thought that was a shocking number of eighth graders that are vaping. But nevertheless, we're also going to be talking about Kanye West. And so some of the news of his conversion, his upcoming album release, and when Kim Kardashian West, his wife, goes on The View and talks about his conversion experience and his born-again relationship with Jesus. I want to address with Jasmine some of the skepticism behind that, but also to be able to a whole separate issue as to the kind of is there a Christian celebrity gravitation that we have when celebrities convert. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But Jasmine, so tell us a little bit. You've got a couple of songs that you're releasing here.
Yeah.
Pretty shortly. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I just released a couple songs over the last 2 weeks, actually. Released a song called Simply Jesus about 3 weeks ago, and a song called, actually 2 weeks ago, and a song called Consolation a week ago.
Really?
So first song releases in a few years, and I mean, I've just been so excited about it. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit behind the stories behind the songs. Simply Jesus.
Yeah. So Simply Jesus is, I wrote it about a year ago, actually, my dining room table. And I was just kind of sitting in my dining room, and the song just kind of started flowing out of me. Essentially, the song is, I would say, twofold. One, I would say it's a message to people who have been church hurt, which I'm finding a lot of numbers. I don't have stats on that, but I did a concert a few weeks ago, and I asked the crowd that question before I began to sing, and it was like the whole room just roared, and it was kind of in that moment, and some other moments where I was just like, man, this is this is atrocious. You know, the number of people who have had these hard, gut-wrenching moments in churches that have actually led them to believe or led them away from even Jesus, you know, where they've said, because of people, I don't really want anything to do with Jesus anymore, you know? And anyways, and so the song kind of addresses that and hopes to just kind of pull people back to the gospel, the simplicity of just Jesus, you know, away from the focus on man and what they do or don't do, and the simplicity of the gospel of Jesus Christ and how important that is. And the second message of the song is really to the church, saying, hey, I believe with my whole heart that there's a overwhelming desire from my generation and maybe even from the ones coming under us, just for the simplicity of the gospel, for the presence of God, for the simplicity of what Jesus did on the cross, and just saying, hey, there's like lights and really fun, fancy things, and that's awesome, but like we really just want the gospel. That's what we need. That's what we want right now.
Oh, that's good. And so tell us a little bit about the second song as well.
Yeah, and that song is it's called Consolation, and very similar concept, but just the cry of I'm meeting a lot of people who they're discouraged by the state of the nation, the state of culture, the state of this generation. So the song is just saying, hey, this isn't over yet. God's doing something in the earth. He's raising up amazing people like Nick, like the ladies that were sitting at this table, that are, I believe that God's raising up the answers to our prayers, the things that we've been crying out for, the deliverers, as the Bible would say, that will come into all the different mountains of society and be able to be an answer to our prayers. And that God's just doing something. Don't be discouraged, you know.
That's phenomenal. Where can they find out more information on these things?
Any music platform, anywhere you buy your music, you can find the songs. And on my social media, my Instagram, you can find information about the songs as well.
What's your social media, not Insta media. My goodness gracious.
It's all good. Jasmine Tate on Instagram and Twitter,
That's phenomenal. And you can also find those, I know we'll have those on our website as well, at pointofview.net. And you've got a Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Okay, share us a little bit about that.
I'm launching a Kickstarter next week, actually. It'll be last 30 days long, last for 30 days, and just raising money for a new album. But all of the rewards, everything about this album is based on resourcing creatives that love Jesus and equipping them, giving them resources on how they can take the gospel into all the ends of the earth through their creative expression. So we're working on some books, some resources, some videos, Zoom calls, training for Christian creatives so that they can advance the gospel through their creative expression.
And so Kickstarter, for those of you who might not be familiar with, I would essentially just call it a love offering, right? And so it's passing around an electronic bucket to be able to help fund a great work that is going to help individuals that are creative in nature utilize their God-gifted talents in such a way that might be able to extend the kingdom.
That's right.
So I'm assuming you can also find that on your social media places, and we'll have those links on our website as well at pointofview.net. And so we're going to have to take a break right now, but when we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit about Kanye and a little bit about vaping. But before we take the break, I want to say thank you. Over the last week, if you've been tuning in, you knew we had the Truth Team highlighting the needs that we have for Point of View Ministry, and you all generously and abundantly gave more than our goal, and we are exceedingly thankful for that. And so I want to say thank you. I know my words will never be able to capture all that it meant to me, but the least I can do is use the words that I can come up with to be able to say thank you. But I also want to direct your attention as well that many of you have also asked, is there opportunities to continue to give and to maybe get some of those goodies that you were giving away? And the answer to that is yes as well. You can call in at 800-347-5151. And if you give at $50 a month level, we will give you this tumbler that has the Point of View logo on it. Or if you give at the $100 level, we will give you this Point of View tumbler, Yeti tumbler, as well as the Bible. And so you can do that on the Point of View website, pointofview.net, or at 800-347-5151. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
year ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of Colorado baker Jack Phillips, the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop. When asked to design a wedding cake for a same-sex couple, he declined. The Colorado Civil Rights Commission declared that he was in violation of the state's Anti-Discrimination Act. Although the court ruled in his favor, a number of Christian attorneys and leaders lamented that it was a narrow ruling. The justices didn't really address the larger issues of whether any business can refuse service on the basis of religious objection. But I found that often Supreme Court decisions are like falling dominoes. Other judges get the message, and we can begin to see the dominoes falling in favor of religious liberty rather than against it. Two examples illustrate this. Last month, the U.S. Court of Appeals ruled in favor of two videographers in Minnesota who produce commercials, live events, and other videos. They declined to produce a wedding video for a same-sex couple based on their religious beliefs. Last week, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled in favor of two Christian artists who design wedding invitations. They were asked to custom design material for a same-sex ceremony but declined. The court made it clear that their ruling was limited to the two artists and not a blanket exemption from the ordinance for all other business operations. But not every court seemed to have received the message. The Washington State Supreme Court ruled against florist Baronel Stutzman, who declined to provide a flower arrangement for a same-sex ceremony. The U.S. Supreme Court vacated the ruling and ordered the state Supreme Court to reconsider the case in light of the Masterpiece Cake Shop decision. But the state court's judges came back with the same decision, so she wants the U.S. Supreme Court to reconsider her case. I believe the justices need to take up her case and send a strong, clear message. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Jasmine Tate, and we're going to shift gears and talk a little bit about reality TV, specifically Kim Kardashian West making her way on the daytime show The View, and had some significant news where she spoke about her husband, who is the rapper Kanye West, about his religious beliefs, and revealed that he sometimes hosts pop-up churches around the country through his music ministry, Sunday Service. According to Kim Kardashian West, she says, quote, Kanye started this to really heal himself, and it's really personal thing, and it was just friends and family. He has had an evolution of being born again and being saved by Christ. People always ask, what are you worshiping? It's a Christian service, she said, like a musical ministry. They talk about Jesus and God. So, Jasmine, when you heard this news, your initial thoughts?
I love it. I was excited. It made me, I felt really excited about it. I think this is, for me, again, this is my jam, so I've been I pray for moments like this, that the celebrities, the influencers, whoever they are, whether they're seen or not seen or whatever, but the people who have influence, that they would get to know Jesus, and that we get to see transformations happen in their life. I think it's a really difficult conversation because people who have a lot of influence, or that are on TV, or whatever, tabloids, all that stuff, their process that we walk through by ourselves with somebody discipling us or at our church, their process happens in front of everybody.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, it's a difficult it's a difficult moment or conversation, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So I was reminded, and I'm looking it up right now. There was an individual that maybe our listeners might remember. I believe it was Glenn Campbell. And so Glenn Campbell of Rhinestone Cowboy fame, he was also an individual that came to faith later on in his life while he had a musical career. And they said the stark contrast that was put before Glenn Campbell and Kanye, whereas Kanye and individuals like Justin Bieber and other individuals that have a pretty significant platform and public persona have to walk that conversion and sanctification experience in the limelight, which is radically different than if you are just a private person that doesn't have that significant of a platform. And so what's problematic, what's interesting when you see, I don't want to say it's problematic, what has been interesting issues that have been raised is that I've been, I'll tell our listeners right now, just so you know, that I'm a little bit biased. I love Kanye West. Been to a Kanye West concert when I was, when his first album was through. I loved him when he was with Trista and his song. I loved that first song that he put out, Through the Wire. Loved that. But I'm also keenly aware that he's had some very problematic songs.
Absolutely.
Had very, some bad lyrics, atrocious lyrics. But I believe it to be true that my God is, his grace abounds in all situations with all people. And that Kanye was never beyond the reach of God's grace and the shadow of the cross. And so I want to rejoice at the news that he has had this experience. But I also know that there's just a skepticism that some individuals might have when they hear this news.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been, I want to say I've been shocked by it, but I think we were talking about it offline. I'm also not shocked by it. Like you were saying, you know, it's anytime someone's had that much influence, and we've seen them do so many quote unquote problematic things with their influence, it is we want to see. We want to see. We're watching to see if it's real, whatever. And the reality is, there's so much we won't know from afar. You know, there's so much we don't know about Kanye's walk, so much we don't know about how he lives his life, how he loves his family. We can only see what we see on Instagram, what we see on TV. And so I think it's a really, scary place to be believing the worst about someone. And I get it. You know, we have to, I think the people that I've talked to that have that type of leeriness about it, I think it is more of a heart. The heart is wanting to protect the sheep and not wanting people to start following Kanye and then something crazy happen and leading people away from the Lord, essentially. So I understand that passion, and I think that's honorable, you know. But he's a child. He's a son. He's a child of God. And so he's seeing the comments and the posts and all the stuff and trying. I imagine that he's having to reconcile his faith and his relationship with the body of Christ and all the things we're saying about him. You know,
the story that I always go back to a certain degree when I think about what Kanye's probably experiencing right now is almost like so. There's Matthew the tax collector, right? So you've just got an individual that the body and that those who've been following Jesus, there's an aversion, there's a skepticism towards this experience. But what happened with Matthew is, well, he said, okay, well, I'm going to pay back. I'm going to identify what I did wrong in the past, and I'm going to show you the grace that has been that has impacted me and been extended to me. And in turn, I'm going to be a conduit for that grace. So it's not just going to terminate on me, but it's going to go through me to bless other people. And I will be interested, not that grace ever comes with strings. I don't think God's love has strings to it. I will be interested to see how Kanye interacts with some of his previous work. And some of the previous words that he said. Because there's certain comments that he's made in his songs toward women and others. Like I can't reconcile that with the Christian faith. So, but again, I'm keenly aware that there's can we agree on the essentials? And if we can agree on the essentials, then I can trust the Spirit of God to work in a person's life. And And I know that my God has been perfectly patient on
Yes.
me. And if I had a public platform, I'm sure there's going to be individuals that are like, Nick's tripping over that again.
Yeah,
He's tripping over that
for
again.
sure.
He's tripping. And so
For
I'm
sure.
just grateful that I don't have as public a platform to a
Yeah.
certain degree as Kanye West. So,
Yeah,
your
or
thoughts?
even if we went back and looked at, I mean, any of us, if there was, most of us didn't have social media, at that time, but if we had records of the things that we were saying.
Yeah, I've got a record of the things I said over the past 3 years on Daily Briefing. I'm like, my goodness, what was I thinking at that time? Like, I would hope that I've been changed, and I would hope that we're all been changed.
Yeah, and I think, the beauty of a relationship with Christ is that the closer we get to him, we're transformed by him, And so it is, I'm excited to see what that looks like in Kanye's life, and I think we're already seeing it in these Sunday services. I mean, the last one that he did, I don't know if you saw that one, but I mean, the things that were coming out of his mouth, he was talking about just, that there's just one way to God. And he was like, it's not good enough to just be a good person. He was like, his name is Jesus. And I was just like, what? Like, coming from a guy that used to, in this article, it talks about that he used to talk about consulting mediums and other things. And so just from whenever that interview was to this Sunday, him saying, no, there's only one way to God, and his name is Jesus. God's doing something. He's transforming this guy. And I'm praying for and passionate about the people who are walking next to Kanye, believing that God is surrounding him with just incredible men and women of God that can disciple him and be patient with him in his process, but also call him into truth with love,
Yeah, I think you said a comment that has just captivated my mind, because I can't help but think that sometimes I think we equate walking closer with Jesus with meaning that we're more holy, but I think when we walk closer with Jesus, we're more intimately acquainted with our own shortcomings.
Absolutely.
And I think about Peter fishing on that boat, and when he's fishing on that boat with Jesus, he falls down on his face like he was dead. And he says, "What? Like I am unclean."
Yeah.
Like the closer I walk with the Father of lights, the more I'm painfully aware and illuminated my imperfections and flaws. But also in that, I'm keenly aware of the abundance of grace that God has towards a sinner like me, and how he's perfectly patient with me. In turn, I need to figure out, and I need to get on board with God as I try to emulate him and exercise perfect patience and cheer on and not rejoice over evil, but rejoice over the truth, not keep a record of wrongs, continue to figure out ways to champion and encourage my new brother, Kanye, in the faith, but also just be wise, just be wise about it. And I just think that it opens up a wide variety of conversations that we can have about Kanye.
For sure.
So, and we will continue to have those conversations, because one of the pieces that I want to talk with Jasmine about after we get back from the break is, obviously, Kanye is an individual that has had quite a bit of experience in the limelight, but yet Christians, it seems like there's this gravitational pull that we have towards celebrities and towards stars when they say a Christian remark. And I want to get deeper into that. Why do we have this gravitational pull towards individuals when they make Christian remarks in public? And so we're going to dig down a little bit deeper into that. But first, we've got to take a break. So when we come back from the break, more about the infatuation, or maybe we don't. Maybe Jasmine's going to disagree with me. But the infatuation that Christians have with the celebrity. We'll be back right after this.
When you gift a point of view, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dice would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kirby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penn Dexter and Kirby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy, but if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Join the Truth Team and boldly stand for truth in a world of lies, distortion, and information manipulation. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your I've got a couple of pieces of chocolate in me, so now I'm your recently sugar hyped up host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Jasmine Tate, and we've been talking a little bit about Kanye West. What is it that when Christians, and I'm working from an assumption right now, and I'll say it, I'll be very upfront about it. It seems like there is an affinity for Christians to identify to celebrate an affinity for Christians to associate when celebrities and those with large platforms come into the family of God. And whether it's a sports figure that says glory to God, or God was with us, or a rapper like Kanye West or artist like Kanye West when he comes to the faith, or a movie star speaks out on the Christians, uses their platform to advance a Christian message. Jasmine, your thoughts as to why there's so much of an affinity for Christians to gravitate and get excited when individuals that have a platform speak about Christ.
Yeah, I want to, be slow to assume what a large number of people are thinking on this, but I would say I think some of what's happening, maybe not all of it, is just a hope, a desire for something great to be happening. It's like there's so much horrible stuff in the tabloids, in the media, on TV, like always being pumped at us through social media about what's happening in the arts and entertainment industry with celebrities, with influencers. We're always seeing the negative things. And so I think maybe there's some not so great, motivations in this, but I want to say that there's part of the motivation or the affinity is wow, there's good news. Like God's doing something in that world, and us wanting to believe that God is big enough to do something even in Hollywood, even in the arts and entertainment industry. I'm sure that's not everybody. Yeah. But I want to believe that's some people's thing, know?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty lot. I think that's a good point. Because like you said, I think one of the comments that I made during the break is I think that breaking news is breaking us. And I think individuals are looking for some respite, some refreshing, some bit of good news. I know that through the daily briefing, the email that I send out, easily the most clicked item and the item that's given the most attention, I would argue, if it's measured by click rates, would be the funny videos at the end. The good news videos at the very end, easily heads and shoulders above everything else. And so I do think that there's merit to that. What do you think about the idea that it gives us credibility, right? So one of our producers came in and spoke about how it talks about the credibility that we have when somebody with a larger platform associates with Christ or speaks a Christian message. I think that there's merit to that. Like, I think that there's a desire for us to want to have individuals that we associate with that have a larger platform. Like, it gives me a little bit of credibility to know that an intellectual is a Christian or an artist is a Christian. It makes me think I'm not as crazy when I can see other people. Maybe do you agree with that? Disagree with that?
Yeah, I think I could see that. I think I could see that. I think there's a maybe, again, not everywhere, but I think culture has painted Christians not as the hero, not as the cool people for a long time. So, when you're living, you're making a decision to follow Jesus, which is the nature of Christianity, is that we're walking against the grain. The culture is not necessarily going to be in agreement with the things that we're believing and the things that we're holding on to, the values, the convictions, the things that are a part of who we are as followers of Jesus. And anyway, so we're not popular. We're not looked at as the cool kids on the block, you know what I mean, for following Jesus. And so I do think that there's something to be said about when there is a celebrity or somebody who has influence that follows Jesus, of like, see, we're not crazy. He's cool and he walks with Jesus, I think there's a reality to that. But if I may, I think for me personally, I remember as a young girl, weeping over celebrities. God just put a passion in my heart for that group of people at a young age. And before I was looking for credibility as a Christian or knew that was even a thing, before, God put a passion in my heart for that people group. When friends of mine would cry about kids in Africa, I love kids in Africa. I believe in all of that. But I would be weeping about 50 Cent, I'd be like, Jesus, say 50 Cent, and so for me, it's a pure desire. I would weep over my friend coming to know Jesus in the same way that I want to cry thinking about Kanye coming to know Jesus, you know? And I think that's where we should be when anybody, like the producer was just saying, when anyone comes into the kingdom, that it should wreck us. Like it should be the most beautiful thing, whether they have a big influence or not. But the influencers have influence. Yeah. So why not celebrate a Kanye coming into the kingdom? If that's a real authentic transformation that happens, could it also mean that the people who are following him get to also see a real transformation?
It opens up the door, because I'm always reminded that there are different strokes for different folks, that not everyone is not going to come into the king. I don't want to say, I'll say it like this. God uses a variety of examples of individuals that are following after him in his graciousness to draw people into the kingdom. I think that's why there's power in what Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ Jesus. And that the idea of another person that has a different example of following Jesus is something I think that we should celebrate, and something that I'm excited to be able to see.
Yes.
Because I can imagine the creative nature of Kanye, what following Jesus for him is going to look like will probably be different than what I think of when I think of following after Jesus.
Yeah, and I think historically, we always think God is going to show up and do something differently than how he does it.
Yeah. He is. He's used. This is one of the, like, you look at the biblical example. There was a Peter and there was a Paul method. Peter had a group of individuals. Peter had Gentiles. Paul rather. Peter and Paul had very different audiences.
Yeah.
And then you see how God is not only using Peter and Paul very differently, but he's also using a donkey very differently.
Yeah.
He's using with Balaam.
Yeah.
He's also using rocks very differently. He's using Boaz very differently. There's just a variety of models that God is using to draw people and extend his kingdom.
I mean, even if you just look at the way God moves, you know, it's like they're expecting this hero Messiah to show up in a knight in shining armor, and like this baby pops up, you know, and like he's like slobbering and stuff, like it's a baby, you know, like we want him to come in the fire and he comes in the whisper, like you know, there's we're prone to like think he's gonna do something in a different way than how he actually does it, and I'm wondering if Kanye is a picture of that.
There's a book, and I mentioned it in the first hour that we were on. It's called it's Faith in the Halls of Power by Michael Lindsay, and Michael Lindsay interviews over 350 leaders in a variety of different sectors, from government to business to entertainment to politics. And what he finds is that over all of these interviews of Christians that are working out their faith at the top, in the halls of power, he finds that there are two different types of Christians. There's populist Christians and cosmopolitan Christians. Populist Christians probably going to have KLTY or some Christian radio station that they're listening to right now. They're going to be going to the revivals. They're going to be going to those explicitly Christian things, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's actually a lot of good things with that. But there's another side that I would argue probably is going to be more of the Kanye camp, that are more likely to go to an art gallery opening, that are more likely to go to a concert where Jesus is not explicitly referenced. And again, they're going to have some disagreements on the outworking of the faith. What does that imitation look like? Yeah. But then that raises the question as to what does it mean to follow after Jesus? There are certain things that are non-negotiable. The virgin birth, the sinless Son of God being crucified and raised 3 days later. There are other issues that we're going to have disagreements on. And I think we've got to identify what are we willing to disagree over but still have fellowship with, like they did at the Jerusalem Council. But we've got to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, there's a fascinating article out that indicates that Christians are willing to pay people for their prayers, but non-Christians are willing to pay people to not pray for them. And so what does that speak about the larger culture as well? And so we are going to take a break right now, but I want to direct your attention to our website. So if you want to go to www.pointofview.net, when you make your way to the website, you can find articles on all the topics we've been talking about today, as well as opportunities to find out more about what Jasmine's up to, as well as Kat and Chelsey that were on in the first hour as well. But we have got to go to a break right now. But when we come back, more from Point of View in the Millennial Roundtable right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. In the American Legion versus AHA, the Supreme Court acknowledged that the Peace Cross was and is a religious symbol. The justices even noted that some who erected the memorial had a religious motivation in doing so. But the majority of the court rejected the idea that religious symbolism or religious meaning meant that the memorial must be destroyed. As Justice Samuel Alito wrote for the majority of the justices, even if the original purpose of a monument was infused with religion, the passage of time may obscure that sentiment. Over time, he notes, a community may preserve such monument symbols and practices for the sake of their historical significance or their place in a common cultural heritage. And as time goes by, the purposes associated with an established monument, symbol, or practice may often multiply. In other words, what was once viewed as religious may now simply be considered historical. But the passage of time makes that line more difficult to see, but that's okay. As Justice Alito explained, with sufficient time, religiously expressive monuments, symbols, and practices can become embedded features of a community's landscape and identity. The community may come to value them without necessarily embracing their religious roots. And if it is so firmly rooted to the community, he concluded, removing it may no longer appear neutral. On the next First Liberty Briefing, let's talk about what the American Legion case means for the Lemon Test. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your host, Nick Pitts, and for the last segment, I am super interested to talk with you, Jasmine, about this thoughts and prayers. Not everybody wants your thoughts and prayers now in today's culture. And so there's a social science survey that was put out among individuals after a disaster. And what it found was that Christians in the experience valued prayer from a Christian stranger on average at $4.36. A prayer from a priest was even higher with an average of $7.17. But non-religious people were willing to pay approximately $1.66 to avoid a prayer from a priest, and more than double that price, $3.54, to avoid one from a Christian stranger. So what you have is religious people are willing to pay for individuals to pray for them, even more so if they have the cloth, and so they're a priest. Non-religious people are willing to pay people not to pray for them, and if you're a Christian stranger, they're willing to pay double in order to have you not pay for them. So I'll go ahead and I'll lay my cards out on the table, Jasmine, and then you can agree, disagree, or just decide that you're going to deviate from it. So I call this the Whitney Houston and the Bon Jovi problem. So Whitney Houston wondered how would she know if he really loves me? But today many Americans wonder how prayer really impacts them. So in the early 1990s, less than 10% of Americans lacked a formal religious affiliation. Today that number's jumped up to 25%. Among millennials, that's 33%. So it's a significant number of individuals that aren't leaving the church. They never were associated with the church in the first place. So they don't know the power of prayer. They don't know what prayer, they don't know the robustness that comes with prayer. And then concerning Bon Jovi, you get love a bad name, but a growing number of Americans think the church has a bad impact on local communities. We're all keenly aware that there's been some stories about, not some stories, there's been a litany of stories that have come out about some of the bad things that have happened in the church and how some churches have hidden up on it. And so now there's a growing number of people that don't trust the church anymore to be a positive good in their community. 50 years ago, 68% of Americans said they trusted the church and had a positive impact in the community. That number today is 42%. So it's dropped significantly, over 20 points in that time. So we see prayers as a gift, but some non-Christians see prayers as almost like a Christmas fruitcake. It's one person sees it as a gift, another person sees it as a curse that they've been given and they don't know what to do with. And so your thoughts on this?
I think this is a wild conversation. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, I just have so many thoughts, Nick. I'm trying to figure out where to go on this topic, to be honest. I think it's an issue of, hey, your prayers, your words are great. But can you also do something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It reminds me of the verse that says, faith without works is dead. You know, it's just like, it's like you guys can believe that that all the water from the flood is going to go away and pray that we have a good day tomorrow. But like, we need some food today. Like we need help today, you know? Yeah. And so I agree. I think it is an issue of, people not knowing the power of prayer, not being familiar with that because they're not maybe in church as much as they have been in the past. But I also think to me, it's a call out to Christians of like, hey, a thoughts and prayers text is great. A thoughts and prayers chain on Instagram is awesome. But I think it's a call to the body of Christ to, hey, let's find new ways to show up. Mm-hmm. Let's find new ways to be present, to show up in these conversations and in these issues as they're happening. It's not enough to put a prayer chain out. Yeah. And I want to be careful with saying that because I believe in prayer. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe that God moves when we pray. I believe in that. There's no but to that. That's truth. And we need to show up.
I think there's and here's what I think, like we live in a false dichotomy world that we have to say one or the other. You can't have both. And I think yes and amen. I think there has been prayer is essential part. Yeah. Like the scriptures are very clear what Paul tells to the church at Thessaloniki. Like pray without ceasing. You gotta pray. Yes. Prayer's got to be the first thing. When Nehemiah was faced with his dilemma, what's the first thing that he did? He prayed. Yeah, that's verse 3 of Nehemiah 1. Was the first thing that he did before he started constructing the wall. Yes and amen, we've got to pray. Yeah. But also we have to realize that there's more than prayer, that's the beauty of this work of being able to follow after Jesus and work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And we have to understand in the culture, let's look at it from both ways. And maybe I'm wrong and disagree with me. Let's hold both things in tandem right now and in contrast. Baptist churches, we'll go with Baptist churches because that's what I'm familiar with, are some of the first people on the lines when it comes to natural disasters.
That's amazing.
When you, here in Texas especially, when you go to a natural disaster, you will see a bright yellow van or trailer with the Jesus fish on it, because Texas Baptist men have been some of the most robust and quick responders to natural tragedies. Yeah. But also, on the other hand, there have been Houston Chronicle stories and Washington Post stories about how there has been some cover-ups within those very same Baptist churches. And so we understand now why there might be some hesitancy for non-religious people to want our prayers, is because there's been some bad things that have happened. But also that doesn't discount the good things that are happening, but it should spur us on to make more good things and less bad things happening.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm so passionate about that just us showing up, you know? So I never wanted to come off critical judging, critical, or I don't know if judging is the word, but just coming at the church in a very critical way. Because you're right. There's so many people who are doing incredible things. There are people who are showing up. But I think those types of articles, what it says to me is like, we have to keep showing up. Like we got to keep showing up because people are still having the not so great encounters. They're still having the moments where people say they were going to show up and then they didn't, or they said they were going to do that and then the money gets used for something else. And all those moments happen. And we can't do anything about those moments when they happen, but we can continue to be present and continue to show up as we have been. And if we haven't, we can, you know? So it's just, to me, it's a call to action for the body of Christ to say, hey, like, come on, let's keep doing this, or let's do this. One of the two, you know?
And I know that it's probably my natural disposition. Like when I hear criticism, it only makes me want to be better.
Yeah,
and I know there's certain individuals that they don't receive that criticism. I know there's individuals that I work with that I can't be critical, that I have to identify it in a value neutral way, because I know that's the best way they respond to get better behavior out of them. And so the last thing I would want to do is to just speak a critical word, but I think it's also like a word of, yes, we're not perfect, which we're all keenly aware of. Christians of all people should be keenly aware of their imperfections and their flaws, but we're following after a perfect God that's exceedingly patient and gracious towards us and allows us the opportunity to live into a better model. And so better today than yesterday, better tomorrow than today as well.
It's beautiful.
And so, Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And so we are done for the day. And so I want to thank you so much for tuning in, listening audience, and want to direct your attention to a couple of areas. One, you can make your way to the Facebook page, www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Be sure to go over there, like us, follow us, what all that you do, poke us. I don't know if you can poke a page, but go ahead and do that if you'd like, or go to the website, www.pointofview.net. While there, be sure you can check out more information on Jasmine, as well as ways that you might be able to come alongside and partner with us as well. And so, Andrew, Steve, thank you so much for your work behind the scenes, and for you all, we'll see you here tomorrow.
So when people first hear about Medi-Share, they have questions. Some good ones, like, what is it? Well, Medi-Share is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry. It's not health insurance. It's a different way of doing things, which leads us to this question. Why do so many become Medi-Share members? Two big reasons. They save a lot. The typical family saves $500 a month, and they feel great about it. With Medi-Share, you aren't forced to pay for things you don't believe in. Find out more. 855-SHARE-40. That's 855-SHARE-40.
It seems we can't get through a day without hearing how science has been corrupted to support political goals. Media entities have sold out truth for the sake of favored narratives. Even some religious groups have abandoned the Bible to support things based on feelings. So who can you trust? Kirby Anderson and the Point of View Truth Team are your source for real news. Learn how you can make a difference by joining the team at pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. In a world of unending fog, Point of View is a shining light. Do your part at pointofview.net/team or 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I've recently started listening to